Dozens of soldiers lined the entrance, but the president walked past them all, heading straight for the one man no one recognized. Sergeant First Class Marcus Ghost Thompson had been invisible for so long, he'd forgotten what it felt like to be seen. 26 years of classified operations across 4 continents, where his Delta Force unit had neutralized threats that kept American families safe while they slept peacefully in suburban homes. His expertise in deep reconnaissance and surgical strikes was legendary among those cleared to know, completing 247 covert missions without a single intelligence leak or operational compromise. But the classified nature of his Tier 1 assignments meant his Congressional Medal of Honor and 7 Distinguished Service Crosses would remain locked in Pentagon vaults marked, eyes only, compartmented access required. The shrapnel scars running down his left arm and the reconstructed knee from an IED blast in Syria were the only visible evidence of battles fought in countries that officially never hosted American Special Operations Forces. What if I told you that the security guard checking your ID at the hospital entrance once prevented 3 terrorist attacks that would have killed thousands of Americans? That the quiet janitor mopping floors in your office building eliminated a war criminal whose capture saved an entire region from genocide? That the gym instructor who nods politely as you walk by has operational experience that exceeds every action movie hero you've ever admired? These aren't Hollywood fantasies. They're the hidden reality of America's most classified warriors transitioning to civilian life. Right now, in hospitals, schools, shopping malls, and office buildings across this nation, Delta Force operators are working as security guards, Navy SEALs are employed as maintenance workers, and CIA operatives are serving coffee behind restaurant counters. Their extraordinary military achievements buried so deep in classified files that even their own families will never know the full scope of what they accomplished for our freedom. The most decorated soldiers in American history walk among us completely invisible, carrying secrets that could rewrite our understanding of modern warfare and heroism. They've prevented attacks that never made the news because they never happened. They've eliminated threats so dangerous that acknowledging the missions would compromise ongoing operations. They've saved more lives through classified operations than publicly celebrated war heroes. Yet they punch time clocks at civilian jobs where colleagues dismiss them as just another veteran trying to make it in the real world. This is the hidden sacrifice of America's shadow warriors. Men and women whose greatest achievements can never be acknowledged, whose most important victories remain forever classified, and whose transition to civilian life often means accepting positions that seem to diminish their extraordinary service while maintaining the operational silence that protects national security and fellow operators still conducting missions in the world's most dangerous places. Welcome to Silent Salute, where we reveal that America's greatest warriors often hide in plain sight, serving in silence while carrying secrets that could reshape how we understand sacrifice and heroism. Before we share this incredible story of hidden legends and presidential recognition, tell us in the comments which moment of unexpected recognition has moved you most deeply. And if you believe that true heroes often serve without acknowledgement, hit that subscribe button to support our mission of honoring those who protect us from the shadows. The hospital administration knew him only as employee number 4721, a reliable contractor who arrived 30 minutes early for every 12-hour shift and had never missed a day in 8 months of service. The new guy, when discussing security assignments during staff meetings, military retiree, when processing his veteran employment preference paperwork, or simply ignored him completely while they focused on managing one of America's premier military medical facilities and the constant stream of wounded warriors requiring specialized trauma care and long-term rehabilitation services. They saw his contractor badge and assumed expendability. They noticed his quiet demeanor and mistook professionalism for passivity. They were about to discover the difference between invisible and insignificant. But beneath Thompson's unremarkable exterior lay operational achievements that would redefine how America understood heroism and sacrifice in the modern era of classified warfare. His Delta Force service record included missions that had shaped international security policy and prevented terrorist attacks that would have fundamentally altered American society. Yet his preference for anonymity and classified operational requirements meant these achievements remained buried in Pentagon vaults, while he performed routine security duties at a military hospital where his extraordinary capabilities went unrecognized by colleagues who mistook quiet professionalism for mediocrity. The irony of Thompson's situation represented everything that was both noble and tragic about America's special operations community. Warriors whose greatest achievements could never be publicly acknowledged, whose most important victories remained classified secrets, and whose transition to civilian life often meant accepting invisible roles that bore no resemblance to their extraordinary military service and tactical excellence. He had saved more American lives through classified operations than most Medal of Honor recipients. Yet he stood at a hospital gate wearing a contractor's uniform, while decorated generals and celebrated war heroes received public recognition for achievements that, while honorable, paled in comparison to his classified contributions to national security. The psychological burden of carrying such classified achievements while accepting anonymous civilian employment represented a form of sacrifice that few Americans could comprehend. Warriors who had reached the pinnacle of military excellence but could never discuss their accomplishments, whose families would never fully understand their service, and whose transition to civilian life required them to accept positions that seemed beneath their capabilities while maintaining operational security that protected ongoing national security operations and the safety of fellow operators still conducting classified missions around the world. Thompson's presence at Walter Reed symbolized thousands of similar stories throughout America's veteran community. Special operations personnel whose classified service records contained achievements that exceeded publicly celebrated military heroes, intelligence operatives whose contributions to national security would never be acknowledged, and tactical experts whose civilian careers bore no resemblance to their extraordinary military capabilities because the classified nature of their service prevented them from utilizing their most valuable skills and operational knowledge in traditional employment environments. For 8 months, Thompson's performance as a contract security guard reinforced every assumption about retired military personnel transitioning to civilian employment. He processed visitor credentials with methodical attention to detail that other guards found excessive, maintained his checkpoint equipment with obsessive precision that administrators considered unnecessary, positioned himself strategically during shift rotations without seeking supervisory attention that might complicate his preference for anonymous service, and demonstrated the kind of steady, reliable competence that characterized experienced veterans adapting to civilian work environments and organizational structures that bore little resemblance to military command hierarchies and operational procedures. His behavior was entirely appropriate for someone proving himself worthy of continued employment. His presence was professionally dependable without being memorable, and his security focus was so controlled and measured that even senior administrators treated him as a solid but unremarkable contractor rather than someone whose operational background included capabilities that exceeded the combined experience of the entire hospital security department. But there were signs for those trained to recognize exceptional capability hiding beneath routine performance. Colonel James Hawk Patterson, the hospital's chief of security and former military intelligence officer, had observed something distinctive about Thompson's threat assessment procedures and security protocols that distinguished him from typical military to civilian transitions. He didn't just follow standard operating procedures. He unconsciously implemented advanced counterintelligence techniques and security innovations that suggested comprehensive understanding of high-value target protection and asymmetric threat assessment that exceeded basic military training or civilian security certification programs. His visitor screening was too thorough, his environmental awareness too comprehensive, his security decision-making too sophisticated for someone whose experience came only from conventional military service or standard contractor training programs. Major Lisa Rodriguez, supervising patient safety operations and emergency response protocols, had recognized something remarkable about Thompson's performance during medical emergencies and crisis situations that indicated operational background far beyond typical military service. When a disturbed veteran had attempted to force entry through Thompson's checkpoint while experiencing a psychotic episode, his de-escalation techniques and crisis management had demonstrated expertise in psychological operations and hostage negotiation that suggested specialized training in high-stress human dynamics, where mistakes meant casualties rather than paperwork. His stress responses were too controlled, his communication too precise, his leadership too natural for someone without extensive experience managing life-or-death situations involving unstable individuals and complex threat environments. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, coordinating mental health services for combat veterans with severe PTSD and traumatic brain injuries, had noticed something unique about Thompson's interactions with the most damaged patients that suggested understanding of combat trauma that went beyond academic knowledge or general military experience. During incidents involving veterans experiencing flashbacks or violent episodes, Thompson's approach demonstrated intuitive comprehension of combat psychology and trauma responses that indicated personal familiarity with the deepest levels of warfare's psychological impact on human consciousness and behavior. His empathy was too specific, his intervention techniques too effective, his understanding too profound for someone without intimate experience of the psychological wounds that defined America's most damaged warriors. The hospital operated with military precision, treating America's most severely wounded veterans while maintaining security protocols designed to protect both patients and staff from the complex threats that accompanied traumatic brain injuries, severe PTSD, and the dangerous psychological aftermath of modern warfare. Thompson continued his steady, unremarkable performance, neither excelling like ambitious contractors seeking advancement nor failing like employees who couldn't handle the emotional weight of serving America's most damaged heroes. He maintained his position as a competent but invisible security presence, reliable but not remarkable, exactly where someone transitioning from military service would be expected to perform given the psychological demands and emotional challenges of working with veterans whose injuries represented the hidden costs of America's longest wars. But the other contractors weren't content to simply coexist with the quiet military retiree. They wanted to establish their superiority over someone whose reserved demeanor they mistook for weakness and whose preference for anonymity they interpreted as lack of ambition or competitive drive. Jake Morrison, a former police officer with resentment about military veterans receiving employment preferences, began orchestrating subtle harassment designed to force Thompson into mistakes that would justify questioning his job performance and suitability for sensitive hospital security work. During shift rotations, Morrison would deliberately provide Thompson with incomplete briefings about security updates, while taking credit for successful threat assessments and incident management. During emergency situations, he would question Thompson's procedures loudly enough for supervisors to hear, undermining his authority and creating doubt about his competence and reliability. Danny Collins, a younger contractor with aspirations for security management positions, joined the campaign of professional undermining designed to advance his own career by discrediting Thompson's performance and reliability. He spread rumors about Thompson's obvious limitations and questionable qualifications, suggesting that older veterans were taking positions from younger, more capable security professionals who deserved advancement opportunities. During competitive assignments involving VIP protection or high-security events, Collins would deliberately interfere with Thompson's equipment or positioning, creating disadvantages that made his performance appear less effective than it actually was. The harassment escalated when Rick Stevens, the unofficial leader of the contractor faction, decided that more direct action was necessary to remove what he saw as dead weight from their security team. During a particularly sensitive assignment involving the visit of a decorated general requiring enhanced protection protocols, Stevens deliberately provided Thompson with outdated security briefings and incorrect threat assessments, setting him up for failure that could result in termination from the program and loss of veteran employment benefits that provided his only source of income following medical retirement. Thompson recognized the sabotage immediately, but chose not to respond, understanding that confronting the other contractors would only confirm their assumptions about his inability to handle workplace politics and professional competition. Instead, he adapted his procedures on the fly, using his extensive operational experience to compensate for the false intelligence and complete his assignments successfully despite the deliberate handicaps and professional sabotage. His performance remained solid but unremarkable, exactly what supervisors expected from a contractor overcoming obstacles, and the other contractors assumed their efforts had simply been insufficient to eliminate him completely from consideration for continued employment. The psychological warfare continued for months, with younger contractors escalating their efforts to force Thompson's resignation through increasingly sophisticated harassment and professional sabotage. They questioned his procedural decisions during security briefings, undermined his threat assessments during supervisor evaluations, and created workplace pressure designed to isolate him from other contractors who might provide support or professional friendship. Their goal was simple: make the quiet military retiree quit so more ambitious, aggressive contractors could advance into positions requiring security clearances and specialized responsibilities. Thompson endured the harassment with the patience of someone who had faced far more dangerous enemies in far more hostile environments, understanding that his tormentors were playing office politics while he had survived actual warfare against opponents who wanted him dead rather than simply unemployed. He maintained his steady performance, his professional demeanor, and his security focus while younger contractors continued their campaign of harassment and professional sabotage, waiting quietly for whatever destiny had planned for his anonymous service and invisible contribution to protecting America's wounded heroes. The moment that would change everything came on a Tuesday morning in November, when the White House advance team arrived at Walter Reed to coordinate security for a presidential visit scheduled to honor the hospital's most severely wounded veterans and their families. The visit represented the highest level of executive recognition for the sacrifices made by America's military families, with extensive media coverage and comprehensive security protocols designed to protect both the president and the vulnerable veterans receiving presidential acknowledgement and national gratitude. Thompson drew assignment to Gate 7, the main visitor entrance where presidential security would coordinate with hospital personnel to manage the complex logistics of protecting the commander-in-chief while honoring wounded warriors whose injuries represented the human cost of America's global military commitments and ongoing fight against international terrorism. Among the hospital's most distinguished patients were some of America's most decorated combat veterans with years of honorable service and extraordinary sacrifices for their country. Sergeant Major Iron Johnson had lost both legs to an IED in Afghanistan while leading a convoy rescue mission that saved 37 soldiers from an enemy ambush. Colonel Warrior Martinez had survived a helicopter crash in Iraq that killed 4 crew members while he was coordinating close air support for Marines under heavy enemy fire. Major Steele Thompson had been blinded by shrapnel during a firefight in Syria while directing evacuations that saved an entire village from terrorist execution squads. The presidential entourage included some of the nation's most distinguished military leadership and political figures with decades of government service and legendary reputations for supporting America's veterans and military families. Defense Secretary Williams supervised protocol coordination while maintaining his status as a former Marine general whose tactical innovations and operational excellence had defined modern counterterrorism strategy and special operations doctrine. Joint Chiefs Chairman Davis coordinated military honors while holding the distinction of commanding more successful combat operations than any other active general, with a reputation for tactical brilliance and strategic vision that had shaped America's military response to global terrorism and regional conflicts. The visit commenced at 0800 hours with comprehensive security sweeps and protocol briefings, followed by systematic coordination of presidential movements and veteran recognition ceremonies that would demonstrate America's gratitude to its most severely wounded heroes and their families. Thompson maintained his position at Gate 7 with professional competence that reinforced everyone's expectations about contract security performance during high-level visits requiring extensive coordination between federal protection services and local security personnel. But as the presidential motorcade approached Walter Reed, something began happening that would fundamentally transform how everyone understood Thompson's background and service history. The other contractors positioned themselves prominently along the entrance route, expecting presidential acknowledgement or at least photographic documentation of their participation in this historic visit to America's premier military medical facility. Dozens of soldiers lined the entrance in full dress uniform, their ribbons and decorations reflecting years of honorable service and dedication to protecting American freedom and security interests around the world. Distinguished combat veterans stood at attention, displaying the Purple Hearts, Bronze Stars, and silver stars that testified to their courage under fire and sacrifice for their country. Senior hospital administrators positioned themselves strategically, representing the medical professionals who dedicated their careers to healing America's wounded warriors and supporting military families through the most difficult challenges of combat injuries and long-term recovery. The president's limousine stopped at the main entrance, surrounded by Secret Service protection and presidential staff responsible for managing every aspect of this carefully choreographed visit to honor America's military heroes and demonstrate executive commitment to veteran care and recognition. As President Andrews stepped from the vehicle, his eyes immediately began scanning the assembled crowd with the focused attention of someone seeking a specific individual rather than acknowledging the obvious candidates for presidential recognition and media attention. He walked past Colonel Martinez, whose Medal of Honor gleamed in the morning sunlight, representing the highest level of military valor and heroic service to America. He continued past General Thompson, whose 4 stars and decades of command experience had shaped modern military doctrine and operational excellence. He moved beyond the assembled hospital leadership, whose administrative achievements and medical innovations had revolutionized veteran care and military medicine throughout the American healthcare system. His destination was clear and unwavering: the quiet contractor standing at Gate 7, whose gray uniform and security badge marked him as the most unremarkable person in the entire assembled crowd of distinguished military leadership and decorated combat heroes. Thompson recognized the president's approach with growing realization that his anonymous service and invisible contribution were about to be shattered by executive recognition that would transform his carefully maintained cover and professional anonymity. His operational instincts urged tactical withdrawal, but his military training demanded respectful attention to the commander-in-chief regardless of personal preferences or professional complications that would inevitably follow presidential acknowledgement. President Andrews approached Thompson with obvious respect and emotional weight that suggested intimate knowledge of service records and classified achievements that exceeded publicly available information about contract security personnel and routine military transitions to civilian employment. Sergeant First Class Marcus Thompson, the president said with unmistakable reverence and personal recognition that indicated comprehensive briefings about Thompson's operational background and tactical achievements. Your country owes you more gratitude than we can ever properly express, and your service represents the highest ideals of American military excellence and personal sacrifice for national security. The words struck the assembled crowd like a precision strike that fundamentally altered everyone's understanding of Thompson's identity and service background. The contract security guard they had dismissed and overlooked was actually someone whose military achievements warranted personal presidential recognition and executive acknowledgement that exceeded the honors being accorded to openly celebrated military leaders and decorated combat veterans. Thompson's response was carefully measured, understanding that presidential attention had destroyed his carefully maintained anonymity and would inevitably lead to questions about classified service records and operational achievements that he preferred to keep buried beneath routine civilian employment and anonymous contribution to veteran care. Mr. President, my service was conducted according to military duty and professional obligations that required no special recognition or public acknowledgement beyond the satisfaction of supporting American security interests and protecting my fellow service members during operations that served our nation's strategic objectives and global security commitments. But President Andrews, whose profound respect for classified operations and Special Forces excellence had motivated his immediate recognition of Thompson's extraordinary service record, was determined to ensure appropriate acknowledgement of achievements that clearly deserved public recognition rather than continued anonymity that failed to honor exceptional sacrifice and tactical excellence. Sergeant Thompson, your Delta Force service included operations that prevented 3 major terrorist attacks on American soil, neutralized enemy networks that threatened NATO allies, and eliminated threats that saved countless innocent lives through tactical excellence and operational courage that represents the highest standards of American military service and personal heroism. The revelation struck the hospital like a devastating blow that completely transformed everyone's understanding of Thompson's military background and operational achievements. The quiet contractor they had harassed and dismissed was actually one of America's most legendary Delta Force operators, with classified service records that exceeded anything currently serving personnel had accomplished during their entire military careers. The harassment campaign that had targeted him for months suddenly appeared not just inappropriate, but professionally humiliating for contractors who had unknowingly been tormenting a national hero whose classified achievements represented some of the most important counterterrorism operations in American military history. Colonel Patterson immediately approached Thompson with obvious professional respect and growing understanding of operational service that had been concealed beneath routine contractor employment and security duties that failed to reflect his extraordinary tactical background and classified achievements. Sergeant Thompson, Patterson said with evident respect and professional embarrassment about his previous failure to recognize exceptional capability. Your Delta Force background explains the advanced security protocols and threat assessment capabilities that exceeded our normal contractor standards by margins that suggested special operations training and classified operational experience. Thompson's response maintained the operational security protocols that had defined his classified service, understanding that presidential recognition had compromised his anonymity, but not his responsibility, to protect sensitive information about special operations methods and classified procedures that remained vital to ongoing national security operations. Colonel Patterson, my previous military service included operations that are documented in classified records, but I prefer to focus on current hospital security responsibilities rather than past achievements that belong to different mission parameters and operational requirements that no longer define my professional duties or security objectives. But President Andrews, whose comprehensive understanding of Thompson's service record had motivated this unprecedented presidential recognition, continued his public acknowledgement of achievements that clearly deserved national gratitude rather than anonymous service that failed to honor extraordinary sacrifice and tactical excellence. The American people should know, President Andrews announced to the assembled crowd and media representatives covering this historic presidential visit, that Sergeant First Class Marcus Thompson's classified service prevented terrorist attacks that would have killed thousands of innocent Americans, and his tactical excellence during special operations saved Allied forces and eliminated enemy threats that protected our nation's security interests around the world. The contractors who had spent months harassing Thompson stood in stunned silence, suddenly understanding that their campaign of professional sabotage had targeted someone whose classified achievements and operational service exceeded anything they would accomplish in their entire security careers. Jake Morrison, who had orchestrated much of the harassment, found himself unable to meet Thompson's eyes, realizing that his interference attempts had been directed against a national hero whose service record included operations that would never be fully disclosed but clearly represented the highest levels of tactical excellence and operational courage. Danny Collins, whose resentment about veteran employment preferences had motivated his participation in the harassment campaign, experienced the profound embarrassment of someone who had questioned the qualifications of America's most distinguished special operations veteran. His assumptions about Thompson's limitations and questionable competence were revealed as ignorant prejudice rather than legitimate professional assessment, and his sabotage efforts had actually been directed against someone whose service to America exceeded his own by immeasurable margins. Rick Stevens, the unofficial leader of the contractor harassment campaign, realized that his leadership of the professional sabotage would define his career reputation throughout the security industry as someone who had targeted a Medal of Honor recipient based on age discrimination and ignorant assumptions about capability. His efforts to eliminate Thompson from hospital security would be remembered as one of the most embarrassing failures of professional judgment in contractor history, and his own security performance, which had seemed adequate hours earlier, now appeared mediocre compared to the operational excellence they had just discovered. Over the following weeks, Thompson's presidential recognition became legendary throughout the veteran community as details of his classified service record and operational achievements spread through official and unofficial channels among military personnel, veteran organizations, and defense industry professionals. His transition from Delta Force operator to hospital security contractor had concealed capabilities that exceeded virtually all active special operations personnel and represented tactical excellence of the highest caliber available in American military service. What Sergeant Thompson demonstrated through his hospital service, President Andrews explained during his official statement about the presidential recognition, represents the kind of continued dedication and professional excellence that defines America's greatest warriors, even when classified service records prevent public acknowledgement of achievements that deserve national gratitude and recognition. His presence at Walter Reed reminds us that extraordinary tactical capability and legendary operational excellence often continue through different forms of service, protecting America's most vulnerable heroes rather than seeking personal recognition or public acknowledgement. The President worked with Pentagon leadership and Veteran Affairs Administration to develop recognition protocols that honored Thompson's distinguished service while respecting the classified nature of his operational achievements through veteran services roles that utilized his tactical expertise and leadership experience developed during special operations that had protected American interests in the most dangerous environments on Earth. My military service, Thompson explained to hospital personnel during his first briefing as a newly recognized national hero, demonstrated that operational excellence and tactical innovation can continue through different forms of contribution to veteran care and military family support, providing opportunities to serve America's wounded heroes through security capabilities and operational knowledge developed during special operations training while protecting the privacy and dignity of veterans recovering from combat injuries and traumatic experiences. His hospital service emphasized tactical excellence, operational security, and professional techniques that reflected both special operations knowledge and deep commitment to supporting wounded veterans through security capabilities and threat assessment expertise that enhanced hospital safety while maintaining the standards of professional excellence that had defined his classified military career. President Andrews, who had recognized Thompson's legendary service through classified briefings and intelligence reports, became his strongest advocate for veteran recognition programs and special operations acknowledgement initiatives that honored distinguished service while respecting operational security requirements. Sergeant Thompson, your approach to continued service demonstrates that legendary military operators can contribute through multiple forms of excellence and professional dedication that enhance veteran care while maintaining the operational standards and professional integrity that define elite service. The recognition protocols that President Andrews advocated were eventually adopted throughout veteran services programs, establishing new procedures for identifying exceptional capabilities while supporting special operations transitions that allowed operators to contribute through different professional capacities while maintaining operational effectiveness and personal satisfaction. Thompson's example influenced veteran services development and enhanced appreciation for classified military service in civilian roles while establishing new standards for recognizing and utilizing exceptional capabilities. But perhaps Thompson's greatest contribution was demonstrating that legendary special operations service and veteran care could complement each other, creating unique opportunities to serve America's heroes while maintaining operational satisfaction and professional dignity through different forms of excellence and dedication that honored both classified achievements and veteran support requirements, while establishing new possibilities for continued national service. The story of Sergeant First Class Ghost Thompson became inspirational throughout the veteran community, shared with transitioning service members as an example of how extraordinary military achievement often continues through veteran services and dedication to supporting wounded heroes rather than seeking public recognition or celebrity status that interfered with professional contribution. His example reminded veteran services personnel that the most distinguished capabilities often come from people whose primary focus is supporting operations and honoring military traditions rather than maintaining personal status or seeking continued acknowledgement for classified achievements. The most important lesson you can learn here, Colonel Patterson would tell new hospital security personnel during orientation briefings that became legendary throughout Walter Reed, is that extraordinary tactical capability and legendary operational excellence often come from unexpected sources who don't advertise their achievements or demand special recognition. The quiet professional working beside you might be someone whose classified service and operational achievements exceed anything you'll accomplish in your entire security career, And your responsibility is to recognize and respect such capability rather than allowing ignorance and prejudice to blind you to exceptional potential. The hospital assignment had provided Thompson with the opportunity to serve America's wounded heroes while transitioning from classified operations to civilian life. Through work that utilized his tactical knowledge and operational expertise, while honoring the missions and operations that had defined his military service and maintaining the professional standards that had characterized his exceptional career. His recognition demonstrated that legendary special operations capabilities and veteran services could enhance each other rather than compete for professional identity and operational satisfaction, creating new models for career transition that preserved exceptional capabilities for continued national service. Years later, when Sergeant First Class Thompson advanced to senior security leadership positions combining operational expertise with veteran services programs and wounded warrior support activities, his legacy lived on in the recognition protocols he had inspired and in the understanding that true tactical excellence often requires adaptation of capabilities to different forms of service and operational contribution that honor both classified achievements and current mission requirements while maintaining the professional standards that define elite service.